Wait, Ty. Look, this is our chance to make it big.
The joke I always used to make about Requiem for a Dream was that it was the best film I've only watched once. It blew me away in a way few films have. It's kinetic, it drills into you, a masterpiece of filmmaking craft, a collage of techniques used to dizzying and evocative effect. But I'm basically not going to talk about its craft at all. The idea for this video came from me being told that Requiem for a Dream is a drugs are bad movie. And I don't think that's quite right. They are, and the film certainly makes that clear in incredibly bleak terms. But that's not the point. I'm not here to gainsay or pick a fight, but is the consensus on this film that it's saying drugs are bad, okay? That addiction sucks? It does, and they are. Don't do drugs, kids, except for the ones you probably already do, I guess. Those are fine until they aren't. Just don't be an addict, that's the bad thing. If that's the message of this movie, isn't it little more than pity porn? Addiction essentializes something that happens to other people, something you are somehow exempt from. Hey, you only drink occasionally or only do the good drugs, and you can quit when you want to, honest, because you sure don't want to end up like these poor schmoes. I think this is a great film not because it's about making you feel sad for these characters, although I do, or feel better about yourself for not mainlining opioids, which I don't, ain't I great, but because it speaks to a more universal truth. Even a reading of the film that draws a direct comparison between the more demonized types of drug abuse and respectable drug abuse, something we were beginning to shine a light on in the 90s as awareness of the suburban opioid crisis started becoming mainstream, is a textual reading of the film. Yes, it's there, but what does it say? And maybe we should give some credit to Hubert Selby Jr., the author of the novel the film is based on, for writing about this in 1978 when the phenomenon was less well known or talked about. But he wasn't writing books that were pious fables. His novels were slices of life that reflected his own experiences and the experiences of those around him. He told stories of people who appeared in other fiction as ciphers, represented as one-note hoodlums or cold, stiff victims, breathing life into those who were otherwise demonized or patronized, presenting the world that created them as one that spins on twin axes of exploitation and subjugation. Drugs are bad, sure. I don't wish to minimize their dangers. And so are a lot of other things in Selby Jr.'s work, some of which were far worse. But the point was never to be either warning or advertisement, but tell you about his reality, to tell stories that would otherwise be untold. Selby Jr. saw poverty as an inescapable trap. A struggling writer from one of the poorest parts of Brooklyn, dropping out of school to work on the docks, debilitated by illness and often unable to find meaningful employment, on and off welfare his entire life, and still one of the lucky ones. As an adaptation of Last Exit to Brooklyn in 1989 gave him a belated measure of economic security in his last years. These are the worst days of the worst off, not a warning, but a reality, one that we may have the privilege not to experience and too often feel comfortable ignoring. It isn't that all poor people are addicts or that all addicts are poor people. Even in Requiem, Marion comes from a middle-class background, supported by her parents, until they cut her off and she is reduced to selling her body. Harry and Sarah, aspirant working class or lower middle class. Harry a college graduate, until the family breadwinner passed away. Trauma present but unexpressed. Bad decisions or bad luck felt but not witnessed. Selby Jr. himself had a history of heroin use and, even when clean, battled alcoholism. He knew as well as anyone that addiction doesn't arrive at your door a needle in hand telling you it's going to ruin your life, easily warded off by memories of horror stories you've been told about those who succumbed. It creeps up on you when you aren't looking, a friend when you feel you have none, a shoulder to cry on when times are tough, an outlet when there is no one else to listen, a salve for your pain and a massage for your ego, escape from a life that seems inescapable. Ways of passing time as it moves slowly around you, that open up into sinkholes when the weight of the world bears down on your shoulders.
Anybody want to waste some time?
It doesn't matter if it isn't drugs, but instead alcohol, gambling, sex, religion, crime, political radicalization, or just elaborate but unrealized fantasies of revenge on a world that has wronged you, almost all of which were touched on by Selby Jr. in his work. Just like how in Requiem for a Dream it doesn't matter if it's street drugs or prescription medication. Addiction took hold of these characters as their lives fell apart in other ways. The movie demarcated by circumstance as much as seasons. The joy of summer smashing into the tailspin of fall as the assassination of a kingpin leads to a scarcity of product, and posting bail for Tyrone empties the coffers, or the optimism of waiting for the mailman to deliver good news becoming the drudgery of that news never arriving. When there are no other options, when the world seems inescapable, you latch on to any means there are, and the worst off have the fewest available options, are the most vulnerable. Economic instability is statistically correlated not just to drug abuse, but alcoholism and crime. Not because the poorest in society are more predisposed to those things, but because you are more likely to have lower self-esteem, more likely to be stressed by your situation, and less likely to have secure social networks. None of that is unique to the worst off, but it is more prevalent. These can become self-fulfilling prophecies, to use the obvious example of crime, a means to immediately improve your circumstance that can lead to incarceration, a criminal record and social stigma that makes finding employment difficult, a vicious cycle that can drive people to re-offending. The drugs in the story of Requiem for a Dream don't exist independently of the theme. Life wasn't going great, suddenly drugs, then everything goes to seed. They are the available means for these characters to realize their dreams. The score that will lift Tyrone out of poverty, and allow Harry and Marion to pursue dreams of entrepreneurship. The weight loss pills that will enable Sarah to fit into that perfect dress, and wow Tappy Tibbins on Month of Fury. They are literal and symbolic. Magic beans they believe will grow a beanstalk and leave them with lives free of hassle, and representations of the corrosivity of that belief.
I'm somebody now, Harry. Everybody likes me. Soon, millions of people will see me and they'll all like me.
It's easy for, say, Beyoncé or Taylor Swift to tell us chase your dreams, because they did and it worked out. But how many millions of people had those same dreams, made those same sacrifices, and it didn't? How many found themselves on the scrap heap of life, instead of taking private jets around the world to deliver carefully honed recitals of their greatest hits to stadiums of adoring fans? Requiem for a Dream is the story of a lie told to us and that we tell ourselves, that there is a way out, that we can be just like the glamorous people whose dreams become reality. And for most, particularly those from the poorest backgrounds or who find themselves struggling economically, those who need their dreams to come true the most, that will never happen. And that is a story told over and over, all over the world, to an audience of one person at a time. A story of failure, a story that no one else will ever hear, drowned out by the stories of a rarefied few blared at us through radio, television, and cinema screens. Those are the stories that Hubert Selby Jr. told. It is a requiem not for the dreams of these characters, but for the American dream, the idea that anyone can be catapulted at any time from nothing to greatness. A requiem for the great lie of capitalism, that we are all temporarily embarrassed millionaires if we get this big score, if we get on our favourite TV show and win the best prizes, if Mr. Beast pops up behind us in the supermarket and hands us a big fat check. And for the characters of Requiem for a Dream, the alternative isn't a world that is fine. It isn't a life of fulfillment. If it were, they wouldn't be trying to escape it in the first place. Desperation is when you feel there are no other options.
Look, I don't know what else to do. Okay, this is our last chance to get back on track. We won't have to scuffle and make that freezing scene every day.
It's easy to say these are flawed characters, but aren't we all? We all make bad decisions or have bad luck. And the question becomes how many or how much you can afford. How many paydays will you need to miss before you're in dire financial straits? What if you can't just pick up a phone and ask for help if that happens? What if that leaves you short on rent and no way to pay? How many couches are there for you to sleep on, and what happens when you run out of those too? What are you dreaming of then? It's easy to see this film as a fable when you have other options. Rich people don't play the lottery. They know it's a waste of money. But the poorest 1% of zip codes in America spend an average of 5% of their average income on lottery tickets. Maybe we could call that an addiction too. And maybe it is. But what else is there to do but dream? When our dreams are vertical, if success is a ladder, there will always be those trapped at the bottom, using what is available in a desperate attempt to escape in any way they can. And success in our world is a ladder where the rungs are closest together the nearer the top you are, while at the bottom they are risky and rickety, spaced out so far as to be unreachable, and one misstep can see you slipping straight down. No one needs to tell anyone that addiction is bad. That word is literally never used in a positive way. Aronofsky uses a barrage of filmmaking techniques, primarily to replicate the style of the Selby Jr. book, and the purpose is the same, to engender empathy and compassion with those in this position, to make you understand the circumstances of the most demonized. They dreamed of escaping their circumstance, and when the reality of failure stared them in the face, they looked for ways to escape that too, any way they could. This is a film that forces you to feel what these characters are going through, from the highs to the lows, the worst days of the worst off, dreamers who dreamed until there was nothing else left, drugs the narrative accelerant but not the point, addiction not inevitable but filling the void created by a failure that was. This is a requiem for an American dream that has long since died, that has failed all but a tiny few, that damages us as sure as any opioid to our veins, but that we can't give up. One more sleep before the tomorrow when everything changes, mainlining that dream day after day, hit after hit, come down after come down, injecting false hope into a weeping wound to make the pain go away, however fleetingly, until reality comes crashing down upon us. And the lesson I think we should draw is not essentializing addiction, not treating these stories as parables or warnings, things that will happen to others but not us. We should ask if that dream is dead, if this is reality, whether we should instead start dreaming of how to create a better world for everyone. Thank you very much for watching. If you listened to this, you made it all the way to the end, which is super cool. This was a nice quick one I bashed out while I'm working on a few other things, a bit less of a deep dive than I normally do, so I hope you enjoyed it. This one has quite a few words in it that will almost certainly see it limited, so feel free to share if you enjoyed it. Comment below if you want to tell me anything, good or bad. Both are great. And don't forget to love each other all the time and in everything you do.